Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we will be looking at one of the most common pawn structures in chess, the isolated pawn. This will be part one of a larger pawn structure overview series, so make sure you stay tuned. As you become a stronger chess player, understanding the plans in different pawn structures become more essential. So make sure you take notes and let's get this video started. Checkmate. An isolated pawn is a pawn that has no friendly pawns on the adjacent files. For example, take a look at this position. This D pawn is isolated because white does not have any pawns on the C or E files to support it. Now let's take a look at a real-life example. One of the main plans for the side with an isolated pawn is to attack the opponent's king. The reason for this is because you see this isolated pawn on D4. It controls a lot of center squares, which gives white a very nice space advantage. And usually when you have more space, your pieces are more active, and thus an attack would be more deadly. The second plan for white, if a kingside attack is either very difficult or not possible, is for white to break through with D5, right? And the reason for this is since white already in this position has more space and more active pieces, opening up the center could benefit him hugely. So for example, playing D5 here could be very devastating for black. Finally, avoid going into an endgame unless you are forced to do so. There are two reasons for this. One, in an endgame, the first two plans will almost never work. Two, in an endgame, your isolated pawn becomes a target for your opponent to attack. Take a look at this position, for example. And this is an endgame where black only has a minor piece and white also has a minor piece. And we can see that this knight is targeting this D5 pawn. And the problem with that is the bishop will have to defend it, and it's gonna be stuck defending the D5 pawn forever. So your pieces will kind of be tied down to the isolated pawn if you go into the endgame. Now let's take a look at some plans for you if your opponent has an isolated pawn. The first plan you should look at is try to trade into an endgame. In an endgame, it will be very difficult for your opponent to execute an attack, while you can pressure the isolated pawn of your opponent. For example, let's take a look at this position. In this position, black's rooks are in perfect position to pressure the white pawn, and he does not have to worry about any attack and can just focus on attacking the weakness in white's position. Another great idea when your opponent has an isolated pawn is to blockade it with a piece. Usually, it would be a knight. The reason for this is a knight is a very great defender of the king, and any piece on D5 will also prevent your opponent from pushing D5. Let's take a look at this example on the board. This knight on D5 makes it impossible for white to initiate any sort of attack, and it also prevents white from breaking open the center with D5 because it's occupying that square. Thank you everyone for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it or you learned something new, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe so you don't miss part 2. I hope everyone stays safe, and I'll see you guys next time.